Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know there is a delay. It hasn't even started on Facebook yet, but you'll catch up with us when you get there. So before we get started, Aaron, I don't know if you had a chance to share it on Facebook or not. Let me go ahead and notify because
What should I hit to share? Let's see.
just go to my page and just share it to your page.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm sure.
So while she is doing that, I just want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today on Bridging the Gap. You know, I am Prophetess LaTorcha, and today we're going to talk about recovering by purpose. And so the last few series we have been doing has been about purpose. We've been talking about purpose, you know, how to come alongside each other, why God, you know, your situations, grief, you know, we talked about grief, we talked about, you know, life, we talked about purpose. And so today, as I add her back to the stage, I will be talking with Aaron today, Aaron Roberts. And before we even get started, I want you, first of all, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be on. I want to give you a few minutes to say hello, give a shout out, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we will go into the questions and we'll go into the conversation.
Well, my name is Erin Roberts. I'm from Danville, Virginia, and I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. He saved me from myself. I love the Lord. I have an amazing family and husband and stepdaughter. And yeah, if you can find me at church or working all the time, that's pretty much my life. But I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yes, well, thank you for coming on. You know, I love your story. You know, I've been there when you've given your testimony. I've heard, I've seen the videos. So, you know, many people don't understand that, you know, that, or I should say it this way, many people who have gone through things in life, they feel like they're disqualified because, you know, the what they went through and how bad it was, that there's no way God can use them. And so even looking at the pictures and the videos that I've seen of you when you was when you was going through your, you know, what you was going through in life, that you ended up to where you are now. So let's talk about why recovery is by purpose.
Well, I think that through my recovery, it was definitely, it's hard to think like, hey, oh my gosh, you know, that happened to you, that's so bad. But for me, I'm glad it happened. And people are like, what, why? But it taught me so much about myself and how to be truly happy and to only chase after God instead
Hmm.
of even material things or drugs or people pleasing. It really just turned my life around because, you know, before addiction, I wasn't walking with God.
Right.
And yes, it took that to get me where I am now, but I'm so
Mhm.
grateful that He was with me every step of the way and shaped me to who I am now.
And you know, one of the things that you know, a lot of people really don't know that, but I had went through a period of addiction, and it wasn't a drug addiction, but it was still an addiction that it. And you said you really wasn't walking with God. I was walking with God, and so the transition of it, you know, it wasn't an instant thing. It was I had to go through the process of becoming recovered so that I can now walk in um, the fullness of who God is calling me. And so many people, and I think a lot of people think if it doesn't happen instantly, God, I called on your name, I became saved, but yet I'm still in a place where I'm still yearning for this. I still want, to fulfill the addiction or, the urges that I'm having. So let's talk about first the process towards recovery.
Yeah. So for me, the first step was just being honest with myself,
Hmm.
not living in denial. Of course, the drugs did consume me mentally for the time. I wasn't thinking clearly. But
Hmm.
once I got to realization that this isn't the life that I want to live every day and in and out of incarceration, I would have sobering experiences that made me snap out of it and back into reality. But it definitely took a lot to get me to where I am now, but discipline, humility, perseverance. I had to fully surrender everything, not just a little bit, not one foot in, one foot out. I had
Right.
to completely change my circle and change my mindset, really.
Hmm. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that you have to change your circle, because so many times, people are saying, well, now that I'm saved, I want to go back and help the ones that I used to walk with, the ones that I used to deal with. And what I've noticed is during that transition or during that time, they find themselves right back in the struggle again, because they think that they're strong enough and they're ready to pull people out, but they ended up falling back into the situation. And so, we always talk about how it feels when you lose someone that you have been spending time with, but sometimes that separation is a lifesaver.
Yes, absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
would say my pastor would say growth without change is impossible. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to really take that into applied and be intentional. Whereas like when I first got sober, I had to move away. I had to change my surroundings. I had to get rid of the old phone, stop talking to people who I was using with. And, now I have, of course, started a recovery group and I may see some faces of people I use with, but I've been sober so many years now where I can help. But am I going to go to where they're hanging out? Absolutely not. You got to have boundaries in place.
Right.
And some people may never get to where they can ever see certain people again. But you know, when God gives you a heart to help others and compassion and strength, you know what you can and can't do.
Right.
Stay prayed up, of course, in all
Mm-hmm.
situations. But my pastor sharing this fast Sunday, she said you need to pray before, during, and after, like anything you're going through.
Yeah.
So, I have to always remind myself I need to pray, I need to pray, I need to prepare. You never know. You
Yeah.
could have somebody walk in that relapse that day and you want to be able to help them, but you also want to be prayed up and know what to do in those situations.
And it's very important. I think sometimes as Christians, we forget. We forget the journey that we've gone through. And it could go both ways. It could go to a place, and I really love your heart, because you are so passionate about what you do and how you want to help people. But, sometimes it could go either way, where, they start looking down on people. Well,
Yeah.
I've arrived, and God has brought me out, because they know that if they ever fall back into that, the magnitude of what it could be devastating in our lives. And so they're moving in a place where, no, I don't want to have anything to do with you. No, I don't want to, I don't want to have anything. And so, like you said, there has to be boundaries. And I think that's something as Christians, we really don't teach the disciples how to have boundaries, because in becoming recovered, you have to have boundaries, not just for people, but just for yourself. So, why is it important as we are setting up boundaries that you set realistic boundaries, so that you won't waver one way or the other?
Well, for me, boundaries was very hard at first, of course. I knew I wanted to make sure certain doors were completely closed instead of
Hmm.
some people keep a door open. Like if I knew an acquaintance who I used to use with, block them, simple as that. But it was
Hmm.
really hard. It was also a learning process. Like as I was moving along in my recovery, I
Hmm.
learned new things and I'm like, okay, I got to eliminate this person in my life. I don't want to see the negativity. I want to go the positive route. And
Right.
I don't want anything to creep back in my life, but
Mhm.
changing my people, places, and things was definitely the strongest boundaries I had, and I still stick with them to today.
Right. And so, everyone that's coming in today, thank you again for joining us. This is Bridging the Gap with Prophetess LaTorcha. And I have with me Aaron Roberts. And so, for everyone who's commenting and saying hello, I can see your comments. Hello, hello, hello. And, Aaron, one of the things that I realized, and, I didn't go through the STEP program. I didn't go through because I didn't even realize that I was having an addiction when I was going through the things that I was dealing with until I got out of it. And
Yeah.
and one thing that I love about it is how God allowed me to be in a place where I was able to. He walked me through it. So I'm so thankful
Yep.
for how God used me and how God walked me through it. That I didn't have to go to a recovery program. I didn't
Yeah.
have to have groups where I would sit down and I would talk with people. But yet at the same time, I still went through the tremors. I went through the coulda, woulda, shoulda moments in my life. But with God, I realized He allowed me to become clear in
Yeah.
the way I was thinking. In the way I was using it as a crutch. He allowed me to see my love is greater than what you're going through. And so, I can only imagine. So when I talk to people, and they was like, you don't understand. You've never been an addict. And I'm like, I have. I just didn't use needles. I just didn't use drugs, but I was addicted to something. And so it's the same process. It's the same thing that you're going through. And so I love how you have the recovery group that you have now at the church, because, once you overcome that, and see, you are open about your testimony, because you see how mine have a little gap in it, because this is one thing that I have not talked about. I have not really become public about. And so that's why I'm sitting here, even talking to you. I'm like, Lord, right now is not the time for me
Yeah.
to tell my testimony, but I'm so glad that you have that recovery, because we talked about recovery by purpose. And so the thing of it is, when you realize that what your purpose is in life, recovery is just a process of what you have to go through to step into your purpose. So let's talk about, now that you have gone through the journey, how you now understand what your purpose is.
So it isn't just about like just staying sober to me. It's about living the life God rescued me for
Hmm.
and what He saved me from. Now my past has purpose now that I'm able to help people. Um, I remember when I was in my addiction and I just felt so hopeless. And I'm like,
Right.
I tell my husband and my friends, and I'm like, I remember sitting in a gas station parking lot and I would look around everybody in their suits, just getting off work, living their normal day to day life. And I remember sitting in the car about to go score some drugs. And I'm like, that'll never be me again. I lost all hope, in
Hmm.
that moment. I did. And that's so crazy to think back on, because look at, my life now. All you have to do is make steps to change your life
Hmm.
so it can get better. Don't ever think that you can't change something in your life, through God and through people who hold you accountable. That's really
Hmm.
important too. I had to surround myself with people who are like, no, Aaron, no. Even today, correct constructive criticism, I am so accepting of. Whereas in the past, I would just run.
Hmm.
I was a runner. I was going to do what I want to do, very rebellious. And that led me down the wrong path.
And I think one of the things for me, even in the addiction, it was not having a clear thought. Like, I didn't have a
Yeah.
clear mind.
Mhm.
And I look back over decisions that I made during that period, and now in my sober state, in my mind, I'm saying, how did I make that decision? Why
Yeah.
did I make that decision? Like, it doesn't even make, it's not even logical why I chose that decision. And so, and now I understand why the Lord is saying that if you are, unstable, Why, you're moving in a way. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, and I understand it, because one minute I'm happy and I'm loving the Lord, the next minute I'm trying to figure out how can I satisfy the cravings of the addiction that I'm
Yeah.
walking through. And I was up one minute and down the next, but yet I still love God.
Yep.
And yet I knew he had a purpose on my life. I knew he was calling me, but I didn't grow up in church. I didn't have accountability. I had the military. So the military also pushed me because I had to show up. I had to show up. I had to do what I had to do. And it was almost as if I was two people, because I could go to work and be present for my soldiers, present for the commanders, present for the things that I needed. But when I got off of work, the battle was strong. The battle was there. And, I often tell people, it was, and also Kiana, me getting pregnant with Kiana snapped me out of it, because I'm like, listen, I can't go through this as a
Yeah.
mom and raise a daughter who could fall into the same thing. And so, for me, that accountability, even though she didn't even know she was holding me accountable, being, there for me, or me having her, helped me to be accountable. So why is it important, not only just for people, but to have that accountability with God?
Well, you have to live your life with structure to a degree. I mean, you can't be so hard on yourself, but at the same time, you got to do. Everybody knows right from wrong, and when you
Mm-hmm.
read the Bible, you really learn it. So for me, structure, I need it. I need to wake up. I need to work, but I also need to give time to myself. But if I didn't have that, I think it. What does it say? Idle hands are the devil's playground.
Mm-hmm.
So if I
Out of
just
mind.
yeah. So if I was sitting at home all day with no job, no true friends, not a good church to be involved in, I would probably slip back into my old ways because I would be bored, curious. My mind would wander. And you know how your mind is when you're
Yeah.
sitting at home all the time. So I think it's really important just to, stay busy, find your calling, find your
Mm-hmm.
purpose, and people who
Mm-hmm.
you enjoy to be around that do hold you accountable. Because I don't want a friend that's just going to say, "Oh, let's go do this," but they know it's going to harm me. Like
Right.
that's not a friend to me.
Right.
So, yeah, just surround yourself with people who are who you aspire to be like, and not people who aren't doing that as good as you. And I'm not saying look down on them by no means. I'm just saying
Right.
when you're trying to grow, you have to surround your people with that mindset.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny that you said that, because I was just talking to my daughter yesterday, I think it was, and I said, when I look around and I'm the one in the room that everybody's asking questions for, I'm the one in the room that everyone is trying to glean from, then I'm in the wrong room, because now it's not challenging me to do better. It's
Yeah.
just keeping me at a place where I'm always feeding others, but I'm not in a place to be fed. And it's very dangerous to be in a place where you're not getting fed, where you're
Yeah.
not being challenged, or you don't have anyone to glean with. And I said, I have to now reevaluate my room, because now I'm comfortable. I'm the go-to person in the room, and I don't want to be that person. I want to be in a room where I'm uncomfortable, but a
Yes,
good
absolutely.
uncomfortable, and a comfortable that where I'm striving to be like the person, like the people in the room,
Yes.
where they're going, the goals that they have, the passion that they have for God, because we can always grow. And I think as long as we allow ourselves to stay at a certain level and never grow, then that's when we become stagnant in who God is calling us, because now we are now becoming distracted.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I know that sister so and so is going to need me because she's always calling. Oh, I know that brother so and so need direction, so because he's always calling. And then you find yourself now not people pleasing, but trying to be there for the people, where you're not spending time with God. You're not, in a place where you are aspiring to be something else. And so, let's talk about the transition. How it's okay, even with recovery, to be able to move from level to level, from elevation to elevation, and not have a sometimes we have that guilt where, oh, I'm leaving the people behind. But why is it important for us to continue to grow in God and with people?
Well, I think. to me is God has been there with me through this journey is he's, filled me with hope and compassion for others, but I'm not where I used to be. So in order to grow, I take leadership classes. I read my word. That's, key because you've got to stay prayed up. You got to stay in your word.
Yeah.
But it's okay to take time for yourself or take a break from certain people or just completely remove them to your life so you can step into
Hmm.
that next level so you can grow. And
Right.
it's okay to shut the door to your past, completely if it's the person's harming your future. But I definitely think staying in my word. Now with me, I really want to, and I've been praying about. I just want to just shed light on it, hope, encouragement, and compassion. That's why I had so many people message me about recovery that I was like, let's start a group. So once a week they can come and we all heal together and
Hmm.
continue moving forward, then continuously message people with no solution or, what am I going to do? I'm just going to keep telling them, giving them resources to out of
Right.
town, but we need something here. We need to help the
Right.
people here. And now that I'm strong enough and I'm surrounding myself with great leaders,
Hmm.
especially in my church, and I have a good team, I'm confident, I'm comfortable, and I'm ready for God to keep elevating the group forward.
Hmm.
And, when people message me, I'm like, hey, come to my recovery group. Now I
Right.
can get them in some praise and worship and get them in the word, show them the love of Jesus, and they
Hmm.
can see for themselves multiple people in the room that
Right.
are doing amazing. Not just me, other people are there that can help too.
Right. And that's amazing because you're able to see that, even with me coming back to Romania, my question was like, okay, God, what's next? Like, what do
Yep.
you want me to do? Because now I'm no longer in that environment. I'm no longer able to attend a church service. So how do what do you want me to do? Because sometimes social media doesn't do it.
Yeah.
You can't feel the anointing. You can't be in the room to get that, that download that sometimes you need. And when he told me to do the morning watch, at first I was like, you want me to do this every day, like Monday
Yeah.
through Friday? You want me to almost preach a word every day? And at first it was overwhelming, but I didn't even realize how it was strengthening me. Getting
Yeah.
into the word, being able to now get the revelation and the knowledge from the word on stuff that I've read over and over again, but there's now a new revelation that's causing me to be able to not only sustain, but now go higher to where, people who are struggling with who am I? What do I do? How do I walk with God? When we talk about purpose, and many times people ask me, I don't even know what my purpose is. Prophetess, what is my purpose? And I would always tell them, tell me your pain point.
Yep.
If you tell me your pain and you tell me your story, I can pretty much tell you what your purpose is. And of course, you have to go to the Lord. You have to pray. You have to seek guidance. But 9 times out of 10, what you've gone through, your pain, is your purpose because you're going to be strong enough to reach back and for someone else. And so, when you have, and you say that you are in a better place now, what are some of the things that you are doing for others that you wish someone would have done for you?
Support. I had a good support system, but I had burned my bridges. You
Mm-hmm.
have to build that trust back up once you do that. But what I noticed talking to others is they have burned their bridges or they have family and addiction as well. So they're secluded and alone to fight this battle alone. So just tell them that God's always with them, God's always there, but support
Mm-hmm.
is number one. You've got to have that. And I mean, some people that come to recovery groups may not be Christian yet, but them seeing the love of Jesus and getting a taste
Right.
of it and seeing that light shine in others, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that right there, they have us to
Yeah.
support them on their next journey. So, and I can teach them, hey, you should read this book in the Bible. That helped get me through this hard time.
Yeah.
And we always tie scriptures in and open up and praise and worship. So, I just support is definitely key. Because you want to have people that, like you said, have boundaries, hold you accountable, and like there's people I check in with that haven't showed up that said they were coming, and I just want them to know they're missed and loved. And
Right.
yeah, just
And, and
that's
that's important, especially so even in being a Christian and moving with God, we have to get to a place where we are able to love, even if and sometimes you have to love from a distance. Like I don't hate you, but because of where God is taking me, I have to love you from a distance because, as you said, like the boundaries. If you are causing me to go into a place, then I need my boundaries. If
yeah.
you are, causing me to feel some kind of way, I have to set boundaries. And I remember talking with you and you said, that you was a people pleaser. And that
Mhm.
was a part of the reason why you got into a lot of things that you do. But, so many Christians are people pleasers that they're not coming to church, unfortunately, for God. They're coming for people. I'm
Yeah.
coming to be there with people. I'm coming to have my friends. Or I'm coming to spend time. Some people, unfortunately, look at church like a social club. I just want to get there on Sunday so I can be friends. But we really have to instill in people the love of Christ. And
Absolutely.
I really think discipleship is the key to everything, because once you disciple them and you train them and teach them about the love of God, then they know, even if I can't get to you, even if you can't pray for me, I know that God will never leave me nor forsake me, that He will always be there. So I can just cry out in the midnight hour and know that I will get the comfort that I need. I will get the stuff that I need to get to that next level. And so Aaron, when you are going through that and you look around, is there, okay, so for me, let me say it this way. For me, God has given me a silent cry, and
Hmm.
giving me the ability to hear the silent cry of women, because I was a woman that had the silent cry, where I showed up and I had everything together because my mask was always on point. And so I would show up, but I was crying inside and I didn't know how to release it. So the Lord has given me the ability to go in the room and I could hear the cries of the women in the room and men now. So what has God given you the ability to see those that are hurting who never say that they're hurting because of addiction?
Well, normally when I am out in the community, I've went up to people and I've prayed with them. God will just give me a nudge to go talk with or pray with that person.
Hmm.
And recently, we went out to eat at a restaurant and invited somebody to church. She ended up coming after receiving prayer, and she said, text me the other day, I haven't came to church this consistent in years. All she needed was somebody to ask her if she needed prayer for
Right.
something, and then she got baptized. So, like, when God's given you that nudge,
Hmm.
you've got to act on it. And there's times we're all guilty of where God's telling us to do something and we pass up the offer, but then you look and you do it. And this girl's been coming to church every week, gets baptized, and it's like, you were listening to what God
Yeah.
said, and He's going to bless you for that. But also, you're giving this person the hope that she needed. So it's
Right.
really cool to you got to be in tune with the Holy Spirit, and
Hmm.
have discernment is key, because sometimes you're like, is this, should I do this or should I not? This doesn't, if it doesn't feel right, then you
Hmm.
definitely should. You got to have a peace about it. But showing the love of Jesus, like I remember in rehab, we would go out to different hotels and pray with people. We'd offer food and
Hmm.
prayer. And I was like, I'm so shy. I didn't want to pray. I'm new here. And, they're like, just do it. It's just a conversation with Jesus. And it makes you
Hmm.
feel so good. But also to see the change in them makes you
Hmm.
feel good, because you're listening to the Holy Spirit. You're
Hmm.
doing what you're supposed to do. So just basically use your discernment, pray,
Hmm.
and ask God, like, hey, give me that nudge of when I see somebody to walk up to them boldly with my
Hmm.
faith. Because you
Right.
got to be bold about it. You got to be confident. You can't just walk
Right.
up to them shy and be like, hey, you got to come confident.
Excuse me. Right.
Excuse me.
And what I love about you, Aaron, is the fact that because so many people allow our past to hinder them. They're like, oh my God, I went through so much. When I look back over it, many times they become stagnated because my past has disqualified me. But you're like, listen, and even when, sometimes, even when you are doing things and moving and you're learning, like everyone else, like, I haven't arrived, but I just love the humility that you have when you do something and you're like, oh, yeah. Listen, I'm learning. I'm learning, but you
I'm in
never allow,
training.
yeah, you never allow yourself to be in a place where you're saying, oh, I done messed up again. Now let me just fall back. Let me just not do this. Let me not do that. Because what I've learned and watched within the church, a lot of people will do that. Oh, I slipped up, so God can't use me.
Yeah.
Oh, I said I love God and I made a mistake, so I'm never going to be used. I've been disqualified again. But look at how many times Peter denied Christ.
Yep.
But when Jesus came back, what did he do? He reinstated him.
Hmm.
He said, listen, I need you to say that you love me the same number of times that you denied me, because your purpose is still your purpose. You're still the rock. And I think many times we don't understand that, Jesus didn't reinstate Peter because he didn't have anything else to do. He didn't reinstate Peter because it made him feel good. He had
Hmm.
to make sure that Peter was now solidified in the fact you are still the rock.
Yeah.
You made a bad choice. You made a bad decision. You walked away from me at my lowest point, but I'm not holding you accountable for that. I'm coming back to you to let you know, now that you're able to tell me 3 times that you love me, then feed my sheep, feed my lambs. In other words, you're not disqualified because you denied me. You're not disqualified because you made a decision to walk away from me. That showed me that you're human. But
Yeah.
because I'm Christ, because I'm Jesus, I'm able to now come alongside of you and let you know your failure is not going to disqualify you from your purpose. Your doubt, your disbelief is not going to disqualify you. That I have come, so that you can realize it's time. And so, in the Bible, he said, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Yep.
But I come that you may have life and life more abundantly. And that tells us, yes, our dreams may have been stolen. The enemy may have taken stuff from us. But Jesus said, I came so that you can be restored. And I think that's something that many people have to know, that if Peter, who walked
Yeah.
away from Christ at the moment that he needed him the most, can be reinstated by Christ, because I've noticed that sometimes it's the church folk that will disqualify you when God has qualified you.
Yep.
And so, he was saying, listen, I'm you're still the rock. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to come alongside people, and even though they may have did something or said something or moved a certain way, we have to let them know you're not disqualified.
Hmm.
Because if we just keep letting people build the pain up, then they're never going to be able to do what they need to do. And so, Aaron, and jump in, because I can feel. Listen,
No, I'm with you on that. Like people, they'll wallow. Like back from what you were saying at the beginning, they'll wallow. They'll do
mm-hmm,
something wrong and they'll lay in it. And it's like you got to pick yourself up, and that's
right,
why it's so important. Like if somebody says something negative to me, now that I just surround myself with positive people, it sticks out to me so strong. I'm like, I don't like the way. I was telling them, actually, I got went to the hair salon earlier. And I was telling my hairdresser, I was like, you got to speak life. Like we were talking about a situation, you got to speak life, you got to speak
mm-hmm,
love, you got to speak Jesus. You can't talk down and negatively. Even if you're having those thoughts, start by speaking the opposite. Say,
right,
I love my life. Life is today is going to be a good day. Thank you,
yeah,
God, for waking me up. You have to say those things.
right,
And there's times where I think things in my head and I don't say them out loud, but you need to speak it. It
mm-hmm,
does so much good for you. And that's something I need to start working on myself, is speaking it more. Because, I'm by myself all day and I think it'd be weird if I was just sitting here talking to myself, but I need to just
yeah,
talk to God, more instead of just
right,
saying it in my head. But
right,
surrounding yourself with positive people. But when you do hear that negative, tell that person. There's nothing wrong with a little
mm-hmm,
person. Like, hey, don't, just because you made that mistake, there is grace. in
Right.
this, you know,
Right.
like, and then give them an example of your life. But most of all, listen to them and then
Mm-hmm.
talk. You don't want to just bombard them with, well, if I can do it, you can do it. You don't, you got to meet people where they're at
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then help guide them.
Yeah. And there's been times, and it's so funny because people see me now, and they see me as this strong person. That I can come to you for anything. I can ask you a question. I can ask you a guy. But there was times where I would go through life, and people would say, "Well, did you pray about it?" When I say if nothing irritates me more than if someone who come to me when I am being in a vulnerable place and letting you know what I'm going through, and they say, "Well, did you pray about it?" I want to say, just get out. Just leave me alone. Just because if do you not think that I've prayed before I even come to you? Do you not think that I've taken the time to pray to seek God? But because
Yeah.
of the pain in my heart, because of the noise that's around, I can't hear God the way that I need to hear Him. So I need a space so that I can be vulnerable. A space. I don't need you to pat me up. I don't need you to come, give me a pacifier. I just need you to give me space because for me, I have to hear myself say what the problem is so that I can now decipher in my mind how to now fix that problem, how to go to God with the problem. And so, like you said, don't come alongside of me and ask me if I prayed about it. Listen, if you see me struggling, just start praying. I
Yeah.
don't have to give you
That's one
permission.
thing too. Just go and start praying for
Yeah,
someone. If they're telling you something, just pray for them. And then, like,
yeah,
you know, sometimes that's all some people need is just a
yeah.
little bit of encouragement and encourage. That's why I
Hmm.
love Kim, who you had on here last week. Sometimes she'll just send an encouraging word, and it's not like I'm having a bad day, but it's right on time. You
Right,
know, encouragement is definitely something that's helped me throughout this whole journey. Hearing people say, "I'm proud of you," uplifting me, even in the small victories. You know.
right. Right. And and even, there's times where it's funny because I will come up to Apostle Sharon and the Lord would say, speak a word. And I'm like, to Apostle Sharon? What do you mean? You can't send another apostle? Like, what do you mean? But we all need encouragement. We
Yeah.
all need to be encouraged in one way or the other. It doesn't matter. I think if we remove the titles and see that we are all human, we're all going through this thing called life. I may not be going through your struggle, but I'm going through a struggle. I may not be dealing with the same issue that you're dealing with, but I'm dealing with the issue. And that's why I really love how God has even opened the door where I'm able to even ask other people that I've never met before, people that I've never seen that's all over the world, to now be a part of bridging the gap. Because if we don't bridge the gap, then how do we get over? How do we cross over? If I'm struggling with certain things in my life, and we have a lot of taboo stuff in church that it's best just not to talk about it. But 9 times out of 10, there's at least one person in the church dealing with what we're trying not to talk about. And
Yep.
it's time for us. And so when we talk about recovery, it's funny because you said you don't want to be in the house just talking out loud. I just said it today on the morning watch. I had to have a talk with the woman in the mirror. Like I was like Michael Jackson. I had to have a talk with the woman in the mirror. Like, listen, you're gonna have to get it together. You're gonna have
Yeah.
to figure it out. You're gonna have to do the things. And then I'm praying because I'm like, oh, Lord, this is gonna be the best year of my life.
Yeah.
I have declared it. And so, listen, woman in the mirror, you're gonna have to get it together because
Yeah.
these are the things that we have laid before God. And it can get easy, with you talk about accountability, but I'm like, do I want to get up? Because I
Yeah.
don't have a job. Do I want to get up? Do I want to go do this or do? But it has to be discipline. Where I'm saying, listen, even though I have nothing, no one to check and see if I'm doing what I need to do, I still need to do what I need to do. God,
Absolutely.
how do we do it? And I think that's important for us to understand that. So, and you haven't really gone into your testimony. And I know a lot of people have heard your testimony, that from the church and from other social media platforms. But I do want you to give us a short version of your testimony of what you've gone through, because I think people look at us now and they don't understand what God has brought us from, that we're able to now say, you can get through this. But they're looking at you and like, no, you're too polished, you too well put together, you're smiling too hard. There's
Yeah.
no way that you can do it. So tell us a little of your testimony.
Well, long story short, there's every time you say a little snippet, there's a different part that come out. I was started using drugs when I was around 29. 35 now. And 2022, I finally got sober. But what led to my addiction was relationships, people pleasing, hanging around with the wrong crowd, going through a bad day, and the drugs being there. I started off using pain pills. And that led to heroin, which led to fentanyl. The next thing you know, somebody introduces me to a needle, and that made it even worse. Then what? Bad addiction, even worse. I didn't know it
Mm,
could get much worse. Going in and out of jail, and not only Virginia but North Carolina too. Just always running, always chasing a drug. But in jail, that sobered me up to where I was like so upset, because I was like, how am I ever gonna, because I have a degree in psychology, and I was like, how am I ever gonna work in mental health again when I'm a mess? But God redeems all things, and He's a
mhm,
restoring God. So I have a great job now. I have an amazing husband. We have a beautiful home. There was once when I got out of jail in 2022 for the last time. Oh, no, wait. I got out of jail in 2023. When I got out, I didn't have a car. I didn't have clothes. I didn't have a house. I had ruined my family didn't trust me. They didn't want to be around me until they knew I was serious. Because they wanted to see if they say in recovery, does your audio match up with your video? They wanted
mhm,
to see that I'm not just talking the talk, I was walking the walk this time. So, I had to humble myself. I had to go to rehab. I went to two rehabs. The first one for 3 weeks, got kicked out, and I slipped. I did relapse, and
mhm,
during that relapse was the only time I ever overdosed, and which I'm actually shocked. But by the grace of God, I came out of it. I was Narcan. I
mm,
decided to go to Regenesis. I went to my mom's house, and she could tell something was up. That Narcan makes you feel terrible afterwards because it takes all the drugs out of your system so fast. And I was nauseous, and she's like, "You need help." Next thing you know, my dad comes over the next day, picks me up, and takes me 2.5 hours away to another program. But I was there 7.5 months, and I made it so much longer than 3 weeks. But I finally got the taste of drugs out of my system. My brain was clear, but I was surrounded. Since it was a faith based program. We were in the Word. I'm around people that want to do better, want to be better, or were once in my shoes. So it was very uplifting to me to say, if they can do it, I can do it. I
mhm,
lost all these things, but I can get it back. And now
right,
God has abundantly blessed me with better things than the past. And I didn't know it. I didn't think it could have got better. But now I know what true happiness is, whereas
mhm,
I thought I knew, but I didn't. Now it's like, I can actually go to the beach and lay out and not drink, and just enjoy it, enjoy time with my friends or family,
mhm,
and just have a good life. But yeah, drugs don't define you, and drugs don't discriminate either. Like,
right,
it was COVID, a bad day, dating a bad guy, and stupidity. I just decided to try it. I was a partier. I loved to just hang out and do whatever,
mhm,
and that one bad decision made the next couple years of my life bad, but it
mhm,
didn't ruin the rest of my life.
right,
I decided to, like your sermon, decided to flip the script.
yes,
So I'll never forget that. But yeah, you just got to do things differently. You
mhm,
have to put one foot in front of the other. You got to say no to your past and yes to your future every day you wake up. That's not who I want to be anymore. I don't want to wake up and feel sick and go chase something that isn't even fulfilling. What a waste of time and money.
yeah,
Uh, but now I'm walking in my purpose. I'm happy, I'm
mhm,
healthy, and I'm just grateful to be able to tell my testimony to maybe just help
mhm.
one person out there.
Yeah. And it's amazing because I met you when you was in Regenesis.
Hmm.
Because we had to come and we was doing a testimony time. We was just, talking. I think it was three of us. And,
Yeah, it
we was
was.
just talking and, and looking at you now, like from, how God makes it full circle. And
Yep.
that's what I love. Even when we look back, you said God is a restorer. And we
Yes.
have to understand that God will show up, when we get to a
Yep.
place and start obeying his voice. Because but it's a learning, it's a journey of walking with God. It's a journey of walking away from the thing that's causing you harm. And even with me and the trauma and the PTSD, there was times where the depression was so strong that I could not even focus. I could not
Yep.
even form a word, but the crazy part is I would step out of my depression long enough to pray for someone else. I would
Yep.
step out of my depression long enough to pray, to go into the enemy's camp and snatch back other people's stuff. And then as soon as the prayer was over, I'm back in the bed. I'm suicidal again. I'm having suicidal
Hmm.
ideations. Why? Because I was still going through my process of what God needed for me. And and it made it so that when someone comes to me and talk about being a Christian and depression, I'm not going to look at them sideways and be like, well, what do you talk about? You love the Lord. So if you love the Lord, how are you going through this? Because
Yeah.
I've had, where I've gone to clergy in the military, and he looked at me with the nastiest look and was like, "What?
Yeah.
What type of mom are you? What type of person are you?" And that made me feel even worse because now I'm ashamed. Now I'm worried, are you going to go back and tell my command? Because the command never saw me as nothing but a perfect soldier. So now you're going to ruin my reputation. So,
Yeah.
of course, the enemy had all these things coming, but it's the same, I had to overcome what I
Absolutely.
was labeled by. And that's what I love about how you have now overcome the labels that was put on you. That you was able to now be there for someone else. And and someone who's watching right now may feel like they're never going to be able to get through it. You're never going to be able to be in a place where, you're looking at me and you're looking at Aaron and you're thinking, there's no way. Where I am, there's no way. And it may not be addiction. It may be depression. It may
Yep.
be suicidal ideation. It may be shame. It may be guilt. We all are carrying something that's keeping us from stepping into the fullness of who God is calling us. But one thing that Erin said, when she got tired, when
Hmm.
she had a sober moment, she was able to say, I don't want this anymore. I no longer want this life. And it's in that place. I had to get to a place where I looked at myself in the mirror and said, no, I'm not going to be
Hmm.
fake because when I walked out the house, I showed up perfect. I had
Yep.
it all together, but I knew that at the moment that I walked back in the house, that I would get into the tears, I would get into the feeling some kind of way. But I had to get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yep. That's
And
right.
many of you, go ahead.
I said, that's right. And who cares what other people think about you or say about you? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people looking at you with shame isn't the right person.
Yeah,
That's why you just got to be intentional with who you share with, too, because
yeah,
I had people share my mugshot all around town, make fun of me, but not one of them sent me an application to rehab. So when I go
right.
through mugshots in town and I see somebody I know, you can ask my friend who works admissions at a rehab. I would text her a mugshot and be like, I'm going to get them an application. Or I'd message a CEO that worked in the jail that I knew from
Mm-hmm.
high school. And I'd say, hey, can you bring them this application? Here's the link. Can you print it out and have them fill it out? You know,
Right.
just beating somebody up because you never know what people are going through. You never
Right.
know if that could be a family member of yours. And
Right.
the judgment is there's no need for that. All you can do is kick somebody while they're down. You should be lending your helping hand if you're strong enough. That is, you
Yes.
should. And that's why it's important to surround yourself with people where you can seek godly counsel and like wisdom that is needed for you. Because you can surround yourself with people who look like they're living right, but they give you the worst advice.
Listen, every time, and then you're sitting there like, but
You're like,
that's why
what
you
is
have to.
this?
That's why you have to have discernment. That's why you have to be able to to trust God for yourself. But one of the things that I've also noticed is people mistake discernment um, for trauma triggers. And so they noticed something about someone and they're like, well, I don't want to, it's something about that one. No, that's your trauma trigger. They're reminding you of the person that you used to be. They're reminding you of the struggle that you used to go through. If I've been an alcoholic all my life and then somebody walk in who's an alcoholic, then I may feel some kind of way because why? I haven't faced what I used to deal with. Because sometimes we would come out, but we never really pull that root up. We never
Yeah.
really pluck that seed out. And so, we have it, we're not drinking, but we're
Yeah.
fighting the urge to do it every day. But
Yeah.
then we see someone else, and then we're acting funny towards them. We're treating them a certain way. But we have to really be able to have the love of Christ, and I think that's the main thing, especially in
Absolutely.
recovery, especially in walking in purpose. We have to be able to move in the unconditional love because we've been trained that love has conditions. I will love you if you love me. I will
Yeah.
love you if you do this. I will love you as long as you are not making me feel a certain way. So we have been accustomed to love with conditions, but we don't know how to really move in unconditional love. And that's what we need for a purpose, for recovery, to get over grief, to get over pain, is that unconditional love.
Absolutely.
Hmm. And so, Aaron, can you believe we've almost gone through an hour?
Oh, really? I
Yeah,
can't.
yeah.
I've had my thing silenced and I can't see the time.
So and it goes so fast because, and it seemed like as soon as we start getting in deep, you look
I
at
know
the time
it
and you're like,
did.
oh, it's time to go. So is there anything that the Lord has laid on your heart to say to anyone who's watching or anyone who's watched a replay?
Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't matter what you've been through, like whether you said it's depression, anxiety, addiction. If you're in a relationship of abuse, that was one of my issues was the abuse I endured. No
Hmm.
matter what you've been through, God can help get you through it. It's the most important thing is the word support. I mean, you've got to surround yourself with people who want best for you, not
Right.
people who are just smiling in your face. But like you said, the little word love. You got to show love of Jesus. You got to love yourself. When you look in the
Hmm.
mirror, you need to work within deep. But read your Bible too. I mean, there's so many key factors you can do, um, but start somewhere.
Right.
Even if you are struggling with addiction, find a recovery group. If you're
Right.
struggling with depression, it's okay. Counseling, to me, I loved counseling when I went through it. It's a chance for me to talk to somebody that doesn't know me and can give me an unbiased opinion.
Right.
And like us girls, we love to talk. Like, what? There's no
Mhm.
shame in that. Don't beat yourself up. Just wipe it off and just keep it
Right.
moving. But you got to also say no to things. Like, that was my thing.
Hmm.
The word no was so hard to me. You have to say no to things that aren't good for you, no matter how hard it is. Like on
Hmm.
Facebook, if you know somebody's not good for you and they're bringing you down, don't just unfriend them where you can see them pop up or where they can add you back. Block them so they're out of sight, out of mind. You got to be very intentional. You got to stand up
Hmm.
for yourself
Right.
first so you can heal, you can grow, and you can get to where you want to be. Don't, I know a lot of people live in doubt and denial and they're not worthy. A lot of, I thought I wasn't worthy for so
Hmm.
long, but God will show you that you are. You are worthy, you are capable. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. Thank you for saying yes to being on Bridging the Gap. And and if I were to leave you all with anything, it's just trusting God. Like,
Absolutely.
one thing that I want to reiterate is how Jesus walked with Peter after Peter denied him. And Peter denied him in his worst, when he went through the worst time of his life, being nailed to the cross, being beaten under, unrecognizable. But yet when he rose again on the third day, he went back and he restored him because he understood that his purpose was greater than the denial. His purpose was greater than him walking away. And so, I tell you that wherever you are right now, God has greater for you, that you will be able to step into that next level. It may not look like it right now, and it may not feel like it right now, but I promise you, if you just continue to walk with God and hold on to his unchanging hand, that even in the darkest place, he will still lead you to the light because he's God. Jesus loves you. That's why we allowed him to come into our hearts to be our Lord and Savior. And so, and if you have not received Jesus and you're watching and he's not your Lord and Savior, all you have to do is say a simple prayer. All you have to say is, I'm a sinner. God, forgive me for my sins. And I ask, and I know that you died on the cross and you rose again on the third day with all power in your hand. And I ask you into my heart to be my Lord and Savior. And so if you repeated the words, or if you go back and listen, repeat the words that I just said, guess what? You're just saved as I am. You're
Yeah.
just as saved as Aaron is. And guess what? That means God is going to help you and nourish you and give you the strength to be able to step over on the other side. And don't look at my now. Don't look at Aaron's now, because my now, it took me a process to get here. There was times where I didn't believe that I could make it. There was times I didn't believe I was worthy enough to even be called a child of God, let alone be doing anything in the kingdom, but God. So that's what I want you to do. But God, don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to them. And you may find yourself where you have to encourage yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But Aaron, we have been in a place where I had to encourage myself. I had to tell myself, get off the floor. I had to tell myself, go brush your teeth, go wash your body, go put clothes on, just go outside, just do something. But I had to encourage myself. So don't, and if you slip, and if you make a mistake, and if you stumble, it's okay. Give yourself grace. Don't stay there, but give yourself grace to say, I made a mistake, but yet still go to God and said, I made a mistake, because you don't have to go to anyone. It's only like David. God, is only you. I sinned against you and you only.
Yeah.
So help me, strengthen me, and ask the Lord, bring me people that's going to encourage me, that's going to walk with me, that's going to be able to help me to get to where I need to be. And so God will be there every step of the way, because his word says that he will never leave you nor forsake you. So don't give up. Hold on. And again, Aaron, thank you. Thank you so much for saying yes. I always love listening to your testimony. And so
Thank
I'm
you.
going
Thank
to
you.
end the live, but Aaron, I need you to don't click off,
Okay.
because but you all, if you need me, I'm only a call or a text away. And I'm sure if you reach out to Erin, she will be there for you. She will lead you in the right direction. We're only a text or a phone call away, so do not hesitate to reach out to us. So you all have an amazing, amazing night. I love you. I will see you back here Thursday for another Bridging the Gap. All right. Bye-bye.